Avengers Doomsday is going to fail. Feels so good to say it out loud. Doomsday is nothing more than a stretched out franchise cash cow that doesn't need to exist at all. It will be an absolute miracle to have a salvageable product at the end of it. And sadly, dear viewer, we don't live in an age of miracles. Even the most normalized normie hailing from smack bang in the middle of normality will be able to look at Avengers Doomsday and see that the project, from a studio with either delusions of grandeur or a desperate upping of the stakes out of pure indecisiveness, is bound to fail. Several trades peg Doomsday's production budget in the mid-hundreds of millions. One commonly cited projection is $450 million. Other reports frame the total near $1 billion, factoring in production and marketing. Even internationally, if every Chinese citizen with disposable income from the Mongolian border to Shanghai downs their tools in the paddy fields and traipses through CCP ghost cities and processes through Tiananmen Square into every available cinema, it still won't grind out a profit for this preposterous behemoth. Given the recent underperformance of superhero films this summer, and the staggering sums involved, even if it did somehow clear $1 billion, it will still struggle to make a profit. The production costs, especially paying its pageant of high-profile actors, will be obscene. The marketing costs will be obscene. The reshoots undertaken when the studio doesn't hold its nerve and instead flinches after screen tests in front of bamboozled or jilted audiences will be obscene. The Marvel-safe Russo brothers are back at the Avengers' helm, but their recent standalone movie, The Electric State, was a bloated, soulless snorefest that largely bombed. I wish I couldn't foresee all this. You see, I really only have one marketable skill. I wish it were a talent for accumulating donors to charitable non-profit causes, or empathizing conscientiously with troubled people as a mental health professional, or leading the way into dangerous settings as a first responder. No, my one marketable skill is an aptitude for long-range forecasting of the prospects for trash Hollywood content, and right now, my prognostications are spilling forth like a goddamned Tinseltown Nostradamus about Avengers Doomsday.
Some call it a blessing. It's more like a curse. Is that what it feels like?
Disney and Marvel these days has the strangest business model when it comes to creative projects. It is what I can only describe as professional unprofessionalism, a massive apparatus of hired people within a corporate hierarchy, all haplessly pushing through with a monstrosity of a film, with 1,000 characters, an unfinished script, poorly controlled communications, leaks either from anonymous sources or actual cast members just airing their gripes for all to see. Actors hardly aware of who or what they're talking to in green screen rooms, either because it's all supposed to be under wraps, or the writers have no idea of the fundamentals or scene partners of any given scene at any given time, and 100 other things already tangling around a production that any numbnuts could tell you is more likely than not to end in tears and financial hemorrhaging and spell the final death knell, the final nail in the coffin, the Wagnerian Brunhilde's immolation of the superhero genre.
I'm disappointed in your species.
Speaking to Vanity Fair, Chloe Zhao said of her own Doomed installment, Eternals had like an unlimited amount of money and resources. Eternals didn't have a lot of limitations, and that is actually quite dangerous. Having recently wrapped, Alan Cumming said, I did the entire film in isolation. Lots of green screens, face replacement. They even gave characters fake names. I don't know who I was acting with half the time. He added, I broke the internet by mentioning something once, but honestly I might have got it wrong. Rebecca Romaine, sharing an update on her return as Mystique, admitted that she wasn't sure if she's finished filming for Doomsday because the script isn't fully complete. I'm not quite sure, she said when asked if she was done shooting her scenes. The script they haven't finished writing it. They keep everything very close to the vest to themselves in an effort to keep everything under wraps. There have even been rumors circulating about 2 members of the Avengers Doomsday cast, presumed by fans to be Ryan Reynolds and Robert Downey Jr., feuding following a fallout on set. Anyone looking at this from a distance can tell it is more likely than not an absurd slow-motion train wreck. Post-Endgame, Marvel has been ebbing away in cultural relevance. You can't studio engineer cultural zeitgeist, and Disney Marvel have this trenchant, gormless notion in their heads that the superhero genre, the old magic, can be rejuvenated, that there is some kind of unmet, unrecognized demand below the surface, that the last half-decade of patchy, middling, out-of-touch, and often cringeworthy offerings can be partially memory-holed, and the culture can hitch back into the groove of 2019, despite Phase 4 and 5 and whatever being a drag, and now mainstream lampooned MCU on-the-nose empowerment. Jonathan Majors was set to lead the new era, only to be dropped after his legal issues. The Marvels was an almost unprecedented box office disaster, so was Captain America Brave New World. Kevin Feige has lost cultural cachet, and Marvel streaming shows were so ephemeral and poorly devised and poorly written they became fodder for undersubscribed YouTubers, and should have led to the formation of an entertainment equivalent of The Hague, where showrunners could stand before a court in a globalized public trial to answer for their outrages against common decency. The fun event spectacle that everyone bought into and got dressed up for, and had a bash reveling in. That bird has flown. That horse has bolted. Fetch is not going to happen. The masses who thronged the cinemas all those years ago have moved on with their lives, and their toddlers have wrecked many of the accessories of their Hasbro Marvel Legends display figures. From its initial casting announcement, millions of us watched a line of chairs for 5 hours. This project hardly seems primed to lure those aging and distracted fans back. Even with an unhinged level of online hype, like with Superman, which gave us a teaser trailer, first main trailer, second and final trailer, and 3 random scene snippets, so that by the time the film came out, many of us were already kind of meta-fatigued by something we hadn't even seen yet. Doomsday has so many characters, played by so many actors, that even the Pedro Pascal joke about him probably being in it, because he's in everything, is redundant, because he's actually in it. The studio's initial, perhaps even only gamble, is that they can stir up and dazzle their prospective audience through opulent studio overload. The surely irresistible draw of seeing so many familiar, charismatic faces in one film will surely redline the culture into a major event. People struck with FOMO. Audiences snared by the audacity of such a project, the mass spectacle of Hollywood's heavy hitters, all amassed in one celebration of a film. The sheer fact they pulled it off, hoarding so many big shots together, that alone will be alluring enough to whet punters' appetites, right? Much of the heavy lifting has already been done, right? You love these characters. They will spark off each other and build a cumulative sense of enjoyment and cultural event, right? But that is like taking the world's 11 greatest footballers and putting them on the pitch without any training together as a team on a field full of hills and troughs with goals that keep shifting, the rulebook being constantly rewritten, and 10 footballs on the field at the same time.
Screeches.
Unlike with something like Deadpool and Wolverine, where stars from yesteryear made cool cameos, ancillary characters from the dense and sprawling MCU will appear in Doomsday, and people in the cinemas will be stroking their chins and murmuring to each other and trying to puzzle out who many of the people in spandex are who have strutted into view. This past Blockbuster summer has suffered from a terrible case of not-quiteness. None of the hyped, marketed up the wazoo superhero offerings really made any profit. The summer also demonstrated that going all in is a strategy. A humongous budget to try and generate a massive tentpole success isn't really that feasible a strategy. You can't get into a nuclear arms race with the audience, constantly trying to up the stakes in search of what is irresistible content. Mass CGI, half of Hollywood's A-listers, B-listers, C-listers, and even hepatitis C-listers, expending whatever resources necessary to gain attention, as if your viewership were like a dude who gets progressively more unstimulated by conventional porn, so he delves into ever more niche categories in search of fresh stimulation, until he becomes so desensitized he ends up listlessly working at a semi to Swedish nipple-clamp scatological cartoon porn, which would probably have better plot continuity and a mercifully shorter runtime than Avengers Doomsday.
I've been internalizing a really complicated situation in my head.
What began with Sir Ian McKellen weeping on the set of The Hobbit due to the dissociative strain of having to act in a sterile green room for excessive spells has metastasized into a situation with Avengers Doomsday, where actors have only a blurry idea of who they are conversing with. How do you know how to emote in such a manufactured, provisional situation? It isn't a crazy proposition that actors might just be asked to say generic lines that can be stitched into a final product, or say a line about another character without knowing who that character is, and instead repeating 20 iterations of the same line with different names at the end to maintain secrecy and narrative flexibility. It would be like voice actors for video games who have to provide hundreds of line options to cover every in-game eventuality. Avengers Endgame reportedly had a marketing budget of around $200 million, and Doomsday is likely to follow its trail. Marvel and Disney will obviously position it as a massive cultural event and will spare no expense when it comes to advertising, merchandise, and cross-promotional deals. You're probably going to see it everywhere. But Endgame had something that marketing can't buy: momentum. By then, a massive narrative arc that had been steadily progressing for years was about to reach its apotheosis. Doomsday feels, after all the muddled projects of the last few years, to be something where momentum stalled and has to be regathered. The days of comic book movie hegemony may be over. A glance at the theatrical release calendar suggests that there is not a single new major studio superhero flick due to hit multiplexes in the next 6 months, which hasn't happened since 2011. After nearly 2 decades of spandex, interchangeable third-act skybeams, and rubble fights, the genre looks like it's ground to a halt. Thank God. By the way, if you're enjoying the content and have stuck with me thus far, you might be interested in checking out my Substack, where there are tons of articles on pop culture and the wider culture of politics and society. There's already up to 500,000 subs, which I'm really grateful for, and if you sign up, you'll have access to tons of free content with potential guest content in the months ahead.